Hey guys, Art13131, and we're in week 7 now. So as you can see, we have 5 weeks left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The last week being a makeup week. Finish prior assignments, and there's a final due, which will be your best work matted and framed, and then you send that image to me. So you're finishing and producing a final that is exhibitable professionally, which would be matting and framing it and getting it ready for hanging. And we'll talk about that later. Doesn't have to be done now. And you might want to wait till the last week of work and pick from the bulk of your assignments that you've completed that you like and go from there. And we'll talk about that later. I want to give a heads up, though, if you have not turned in a lot of work from past prior weeks, that this would be the best time to start doing that, because we're well into the second half of the term and heading toward the end of the term. So you want to get caught up so you don't have a lot of incomplete assignments or stuff you have not done at all, or assignments I asked you to work on more for a better grade and you haven't sent it back, out there looming over you. Because it becomes very annoying and frustrating and daunting to have all that work to do still. So you want to get on that now if you are one of the students that have not completed a lot of the work out of the past. Um, if you've been keeping up on it, then great. And several have, and there's several that have not. So I'll also be sending a midterm, basically middle of the term, heads up on what your grade is at the moment and what you are missing, what you have not turned in, or what I have asked you to turn in again with a redo or an adjustment with examples sent and suggestions, and you have not turned that in again. I'll heads you up on that as well. So look for that in the next day or two. So let's talk about number 12. Week 7, number 12, is where we're at. Illusion of depth. So what is an illusion of depth? Depth, and actually all this week we're going to talk about perception. Um, that's what number 13 and the weekend homework would be. But the illusion of depth, meaning that everything that is going away from you or in the distance looks smaller, but in reality it might not be any smaller than something close to you. It's the same size. Like several ways we could show that is, this is a good one to do. Mind you that the sky is not white, so they didn't finish this out. Probably that road is not white either, because it's either dirt or asphalt, right? And that's not white. So you got to take into account when you're looking at these examples that then maybe some of them aren't actually uh, finished out in a shading way that is reality, like the sky and the road in particular, and some of the other things on this one. But the point here, the illusion of depth. So these trees are relatively maybe the same size, but as they go off into the distance, what is this, maybe 12, 15 feet, and then back and back and back, they get smaller and smaller looking. So they seem to be smaller when in reality they probably aren't. Because they just appear to be smaller. Because everything, like if a person was to be walking away from you, or a train going away on this track, it seems to get smaller and smaller and smaller till it disappears. Okay? That's the illusion of depth. And one of the ways you do it is, this is called converging lines that end up in the distance converging into a small point. Each railroad tie gets smaller looking, shorter looking than the one previous, and they get closer together on the rail. They appear to be closer together and smaller as they go away. The same with these fence posts. They get smaller and supposedly closer together, although they're not representing that as well here. Here they are. So the distance between that tree and that tree, and this tree and that tree, and this tree and that tree, and back, keeps diminishing, and they get shorter. It gets a shorter distance between them. It's an illusion. They're not really doing that. It's just your perception of it is that, because of where you're standing. Okay, they kind of didn't finish out these ties very much, but this is the same idea. This is horribly shaded. It's not reality. There's really not a borderline on mountains or on clouds. There never is. If you really look at it, it's shading that ends somewhere. You look at a mountain, do you see a borderline across the top? No. Do you look at clouds, do you see a borderline around it? No. It's either white with a background of blue, and that's the difference. That's what separates them. That's where the edge meets the other color. And then you're using graphite, of course, you're going to put that into different levels of tone to represent what color you're talking about. And here again, they didn't do the sky, which is either gray or blue, not white. So that's what you're going to look at this. This is just showing you the idea of illusion of depth, with telephone poles going off into the distance and converging lines of the railroad ties going off into the distance. This is more accurate to something in the sky, at least. There's some sort of smudging of tone up there. And, most of the ground has that as well. This would be illusion of depth, showing that these trees seem to get smaller in the distance. And then up here on the mountain, they're really small. They're hardly defined as trees. But we perceive them as trees, of course. But this is showing the depth. All these trees may be relatively the same size necessarily. I don't know. But in an overall, most than not, these trees are getting smaller, or appearing to get smaller as they go off into the distance. Okay, so that's the illusion of the depth. And also mountains that overlap one to the other. So this one obviously in front of this because it's overlapping here. Then this one's in the distance, and it also is less defined than something here where you're actually seeing various texture and detail in this mountain. You're not seeing it in that one. So that would be showing a depth. This is kind of a pen and ink style of shading, where you don't shade with the side of the pencil. You make hatch marks and whatnot. But it's still showing that trees appear to be smaller up on the mountaintops over here, as opposed to the ones in foreground. A lot more detail. Of course, you're seeing all these flowers here, when you're not going to really see the detail of flowers way back in here. It's too far away. And the fence is getting smaller and closer together, appearing to do that. It's appearing to get smaller, and all the posts are closer together and shorter. But it's an illusion. That's the illusion of depth that's going on in that particular example. Of course, anything you draw is going to have shading for the sky, for the mountains, for the trees, for the dirt, for everything. And you're going to have to show your light source as well. So what side is the light shining on? And you want to show all of that. This one's not really showing that very well. None of these really are. This one is in a way because it has a cast shadow from the trees and the posts and that tree and presumably the house back here all have a cast shadow, so the light source is coming from the right. That's what I want to see. I want to see that you understand what we've learned. Light source, cast shadows, shadow side of trees, light side of trees, light side of the house, shadow side of the house, all that. Shadow side of the railroad ties in the front, not being picked up on the sun on that side. All that is represented, and all the other shading, which this, I said before, does not have sky shading or road shading when it should have that. And the railroad ties aren't white either. They're dark brown, at least the ones I've ever seen. So you want to represent that in whatever you're drawing. Even though this is an example of depth, it is not finished out as a proper drawing. We're doing proper drawings where we're going to finish out with shading, okay? And that's what I want to stress here. Let's see what else we can find other than those examples. And this one I always show is a really pretty cool one. So you're going down into a tunnel. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. Some show a light in foreground and then it's dark down in there. It's a gradual transition, one way or the other. If you were light here and dark there, or dark here, light there, it's a gradual transition into that lighter tone. There's little sections that gradually get darker and darker as they come out, and lighter as they're going down in this particular tunnel. Then you have subject matter here. You got a person walking. Okay, he's a silhouette because you're not seeing much detail because the light is all on the other side of him, and basically a silhouette, not being picked up on the light much. But it's a railroad ties going on. Railroad rails and ties getting shorter and smaller appearing. There's your illusion of depth again. You'll see many different ways of doing that in here. This is also a good one. Ladder going down into a hole. All the runs of the ladder and the sides converging down into the hole, getting closer and closer appearing. The ladder's the same size. If you were to pull it out and look at it straight up and down, straight on, all the runs would be the same distance from each other and distance from here to here. Let's say that was 2 feet. Well, it'd be 2 feet way down here too. That's the illusion. It appears to get smaller. It appears that everything's getting closer together. And the same with the sides of the hole. So there's another way to do it. These are too, they're not that as much. Maybe these are. This is okay. It does look like you're converging down into a distance and it's showing some depth. I'm not a big fan of that one, but okay. And this sort of idea where some things are overlapping others. And it appears that this is behind that, or this is in front of that, in front of that, in front of that, in front of that, and it's all tearing back. Because of the way they've shaded it, this appears to be on top of this one, on top of that one, because of the shading. Light here, darker here, where it's sort of a cast shadow from this overlapping that. So you could do that one, something like that anyway. Some other ideas here. This is kind of a cool idea. So you're going down into a hole, and then you have this water that's sort of feeding out closer to you. This path of water appears to getting more wide when it probably isn't. So there's an idea on the illusion of depth. And many of these are, here you got the trees with no other shading, which isn't accurate. Whatever you draw, I want to put it into place. Put it in a realistic place. So you have the aqueduct sort of idea here going off into the distance, and all these arches seem to get closer together and shorter and shorter and shorter, when in reality it's the same size up and down all the way back. Okay, but look at all this beautiful shading you could do. Lights and darks in the sky, lights and darks everywhere, and in all this light and dark on the grass. You're doing this with graphite. You're picking several levels of tone to show the lighter and darker colors with the graphite. This is another illusion of depth, which is called atmospheric perspective, where you, each mountain, and you'll see this in reality, you'll see this in real life, if you look at a mountain, or if you're in a place where you can see a large distance of mountain range, each one behind the other that is overlapped by the one in front seems to get a little less detail and also fainter, or a slight grayish blue that's lighter and lighter and lighter as it goes back into the distance. It's because of the particles in the air, and there's more distance involved with how far as you go back. So there's more particles in this back here coming to your eye view than this one, because it's further away. So that all plays on your perspective. And also it's showing depth. Each one is overlapping the other, and it's very obvious that that's happening. It's sort of the same idea, where these have more detail in the front, and the ones in the back are losing detail, and they're a little more faint. So you'll see that in various mountains sort of stuff. And in any case, they're overlapping each other. So this one's coming in front of this one, in front of that one, in front of that one, because of their position and where they're drawn in. You have more detail here, much of detail. The fence, it appears to get smaller as it goes away. And then you got some buildings over here that are definitely smaller. If they were here compared to the fence, they'd be a lot larger. But they're appearing to be smaller back here because of the distance. They're way back there. Okay, so that's what you're trying to show with the illusion of depth. And I go to Bing. I prefer Bing, but you can find other images. Bing Images is pretty good. It kind of gets more obscure back here on what they're talking about as far as depth goes, but any of those will work. This is an illusion of depth, because the trees are getting taller and taller and taller. Everything seems to be appearing to get smaller up there. The trunks get thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner, and all the leaves are up here look a lot smaller than the ones down here. So that's an illusion of depth. So pick which one you're going to do, and maybe get your own idea from these, and do that. Do an illusion of depth drawing. I don't mind if you put color to these, if you have that ability, you've done it before. I mean, if you're really good at painting or using color, then, but go ahead and try it. But I'm just saying, you have to have the illusion of depth. You have to play it out. Everything can't be the same value in color. You've got to have areas where they get lighter and darker to show that depth. Okay? And you have to show your light source as well when you're using color. You have to show a shadow side and a lit up side. Where's your direction of your light source coming from? You have to represent that. This one appears to be coming slightly from the right because it looks like that side is a little more lit up than the other, but it's really kind of a reflection on the other side. The reason the ladder works so well is that the sides of the rock or the hole are darker than the ladder, so they separate themselves, and the ladder starts to stand out because of the darker tones of the background that it's up against. If you didn't have that, it wouldn't have as much shape or be as much 3D appearance. Definitely. This is sort of showing an illusion of depth as well, because they do overlap. So overlapping, diminishing in detail and value. Value meaning how much you're saturating with your particular media you're using, graphite or color. So this is another way to do it too. That's pretty cool. So these are kind of going off into the distance. And then you got your way distance back here. But, it's illusion of depth. If you were to walk down the path here, all these bushes or whatever they are, flower bushes, they would look like that. They would be right there with you in the space you're in, and they would look like this size, as opposed to getting smaller from where you're standing. They appear to be getting smaller and smaller. Some of these are really intricate, of course. This idea. If you want to try that, please do. This is another idea of illusion of depth, kind of windows going off. Come up with your own idea, too. That's, in this sense, a really good idea. You can get an idea from this, right? Stuff that's tearing back and going into itself. This is obviously down there. But this is drawn on a two-dimensional paper. It isn't three-dimension, but it looks like that because of all the shading and where you positioned everything. In our minds, we go, oh, well, that's a depth. There's space there. It's a distance going back. And you've accomplished that on a two-dimensional plane because of all the shading and the illusion of depth elements of converging lines, things getting smaller, closer together, diminished detail and color or value in your graphite to lighter, fainter tones. That all tells us that there's a distance involved when we're looking at your two-dimensional drawing. It starts taking on a three-dimensional appearance. Now you can do this with roads too. And all the mountains going back in there. And I didn't show that here, but yeah, I did sort of with this path going off into the mountains. Now you could actually draw another path over here and over here and over here and a little path and really show that depth that way as well. All right, so I'll leave it at that. And then we're going to talk about two-point perspective in a building and a corner of a room, which is basically two-point or one-point perspective. I'll explain all that later, and we'll have a video on it as well. But the illusion of depth, I think you can handle this on your own by the examples I've given you, of which there are many. Of course, this one's too. Everything seems to getting smaller back here. And you can go on and look at a lot of these and still get more and more ideas. Just that in itself is talking about depth. And there's many ideas. So pick one, make your own idea from those as an influence. That's okay. And we'll talk with you probably tomorrow or Thursday. Probably Thursday I'll get the other video up. All right. Thank you.